Hello, my name is Stephen McIver, and here today I'm going to give you a short presentation on how to study the Bible. Just to start off, remember to study prayerfully. Remember to pray before you start studying, as the Holy Spirit will open up the Word to you as you're studying it. So, starting off, crossing the gap. So, the Bible was written many, many years ago, and so there is a time barrier that has to be crossed whenever you're studying the Bible. So that journey must be made from today to the time when the text was written. The Bible was originally written using a combination of three languages: Aramaic and Hebrew for the Old Testament, and Greek for the New Testament. Each language has its idioms and words that only contain their true meaning in the original context. And not every word in the Bible is aimed at you, is very important to remember, in your current place and time. You must understand the time and the culture that the words were recorded in. So whenever you're studying the Bible, just make sure not to read it in a self-centered way. Remember that many of the stories are written to specific people. So choosing a translation, very important when you go to studying the Bible. We're going to go over some of the different categories of translations here. Formal equivalence. It's a literal translation, word for word. The NASB and the ESV are good formal translations. Functional equivalence, dynamic, idiomatic, translated in the context, sometimes paraphrased or often paraphrased. The NLT is one of these many translations. The Message is one that uses lots of paraphrasing. And then dynamic equivalence, so a mix of literal and dynamic. It's a good middle ground, has your literal translations, but also ones that are obviously idioms. It does the best that it can to translate that into something that means something today. The NIV falls into this category and is a very popular translation. The best Bible translation is not one but many, so there is no single best one. You need to study multiple translations in order to capture all the meaning of the verses, where something may not translate well to you through the word for word. You may find that it's revealed to you through one that is more of a functional equivalence. So make sure to take multiple translations and compare them with each other in your word studies. So here's a chart that shows the different translations of the Bible and where they kind of fall on this translation spectrum. On the left side, the word for word, the formal equivalent. In the middle, the thought for thought, the dynamic equivalent. And there on the far right, the paraphrasing, the functional equivalent. So with these, you can find translations in each of these three categories to be able to do your word studies. So literary genre. So there are three main genres in the Bible. There's more than that, but three main ones: discourse, narrative, and poetry. And each text has a set of rules that you read by. If you're reading in discourse, words that are spoken or written from one person to another. These are more personal and often target a group of people in the Bible, often Israel or a church. Narrative, words that simply tell a story. Often they tell the history of Israel in the Old Testament, and the Gospels and the Acts are examples of these in the New Testament. And poetry, words that convey their meaning through images and often formally structured. The Psalms are the best example of poetry in the Bible. Some Bible translations will use stanzas to show when poems or songs begin and end. And there are many other genres at work in the Bible: law, prophecy, wisdom, and apocalypse. Word studies. So the aim of word studies is to understand and reflect on the author's intended meaning. And so whenever you're doing your word studies, you may pick out a word that you want to study, and it's going to have a semantic range. It's the range of possible meanings of a word. So a word may have one meaning, two meanings. A word can have as many, it could have up to 5 meanings, and so it can be very difficult to translate exactly what the original author was aiming at. Context determines the specific meaning of a word, though. So for instance, the word bear can mean a large, scary animal, or it can mean a heavy burden that's being carried. It just depends on what the context is. If you're in the woods, it might actually be a bear. So Bible dictionaries help in finding the semantic range. Online Bible dictionaries greatly aid in searches. Study the words that have big theological impact. So if a passage doesn't make sense when you take a word out of it, that word may be a candidate to do a word study on. All right, and that's it. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it. God bless.